We are continuing our studies on lipids, and today we are going to look at the classification of lipids and fatty acids. We start by looking at the various types of lipids. So, lipids can be grouped into three main. So, we have the simple lipids, the compound lipids, and the derived lipids. So, we'll pick them one after the other and look at them. So simple lipids are esters of fatty acids, and under the simple lipids, we have fats and acids as examples. The fats are esters of fatty acids and glycerol, and acids are esters of long-chain fatty acid and long-chain alcohols. So now let us look at the compound lipids. The compound lipids are esters of fatty acids with alcohol and possesses additional groups. And these additional groups may be phosphorus or proteins or sugar. The last is the derived lipids. Derived lipids are derivatives or substances obtained by the hydrolysis of either a simple lipid or a compound lipid. So we'll be taking them in the next slides and just look at them into detail. Neutral lipids. So first of all, what you have to note is that fat and oils are also called neutral lipids. They are called neutral lipids because they are uncharged due to the absence of the ionizable groups in it. Neutral lipids are also called triacylglycerol or triglycerides, and they are esters of fatty acid and glycerol. Now, these neutral lipids can be grouped into two. We have the simple triglycerides and the mixed triglycerides. So let's start by looking at the simple triglycerides. So if all the three hydroxyl groups of the glycerol are esterified to the same fatty acid, the simple triglyceride is formed. And an example is the tripalmitin. Now, so from the diagram over here or from the structure over here, now we can see that each of the hydroxyl groups of the glycerol is being esterified to three fatty acid chains which are the same. So as you can see over here, so the fatty acid over here is the same as this, is also the same as this. So this type of triglyceride is called simple triglyceride because all the three hydroxyl groups of the glycerol are esterified to the same fatty acid as shown here. Mixed triglycerides. So what you have to note is that if the hydroxyl groups of the glycerol are esterified to different fatty acid, a mixed triglyceride is formed. So as we can see over here, we have three different fatty acids over here being esterified to the hydroxyl groups of the glycerol. So this is a different, this is one fatty acid, this is also a different fatty acid, and this is also a different fatty acid. So this type of triglyceride is called mixed triglycerides. And this is an example. Acids. Acids are simple lipids made up of long-chain fatty acids esterified to long-chain alcohols. So this is the structure for acids. Now, a very common example of acids is the BU acid. So let us look at the BWAS formation. So in a BWAS formation, a long chain fatty acids like the palmitic acid esterified to myricide alcohol or tricotanol, which is a long chain alcohol. So as you can see from this reaction over here, this is our palmitic acid, which is a long chain fatty acid, reacting with the myricide alcohol, which is also a long chain alcohol, to form an ester linkage over here. So this is just the structure of the BWAS. Compound lipids. Compound lipids are also called conjugated lipids, and they are esters of fatty acids with alcohol and possesses additional groups which may be phosphorus. So what it means is that if the additional group is phosphorus, we have phospholipids, and if the additional group is protein, we have lipoproteins, and if the additional group is sugar, we have glycolipids. So now let's look at phospholipids. What you have to notice is that phospholipids are the structure units of cell membrane. And phospholipids are a class of lipids whose molecules has a hydrophilic head containing a phosphate group as seen over here. So this is the hydrophilic head of the phospholipid, and this is the phosphate group seen over here. And two hydrophilic tails derived from fatty acid. So these are the hydrophilic tails, which is derived from fatty acid. And what you can see over here is that one of the fatty acid is saturated and one is unsaturated. So this is the structure for phospholipids, and this is the same as this. So this is the hydrophobic head containing the phosphate group, and this is the hydrophobic tail containing our saturated and unsaturated fatty acids. Derived lipids. These are the derivatives or substances obtained by the hydrolysis of lipids. So it can be obtained from the hydrolysis of simple lipids or compound lipids. So example is fatty acid, glycerol, cholesterol, steroids, fat solubles, example vitamin A, D, and E, and carotenoids. So these are all examples of derived lipids that are obtained by the hydrolysis of either simple lipids or compound lipids. Lipids and fatty acid. Fats have a three-carbon backbone called glycerol, as well as fatty acid chains. The fatty acid chain is basically a string of carbon and hydrogen atom. So now let us look at the glycerol. Glycerol is a triol with a structure of propane substituted at position 1, 2, and 3 by hydroxyl groups over here. So as we can see, these are the hydroxyl groups over here. And this is on the first carbon, the second carbon, and the third carbon over here. And glycerol has a molecular formula as this C3H8 and O3, and the molecular structure as this. So the molecular structure can be written as this, or this, or this. So let's see how to make a fat molecule. So what you have to note is that to make a fat molecule, hydrogen on the hydroxyl groups on the glycerol backbone react with the hydroxyl on the carboxyl group. So as seen over here, of the fatty acid in a dehydration synthesis reaction. This yield a fat molecule with three fatty acid tails bound to the glycerol backbone as seen over here through ester linkages and three water molecules. So this is the three water molecules produced over here, and this is our neutral fat or triglycerides. What you have to notice is that one, the triglycerides may contain three identical fatty acid tails or three different fatty acid tails. That is with different length or patterns of double bonds. So as you can see over here, from these two illustration or molecular structure over here, we can see that the first, which happens to be tristerin, is a simple triglyceride because it has the same fatty acids being esterified to the hydroxyl group of the glycerol. And this is a mixed triglyceride because we have three different fatty acids being esterified to the hydroxyl groups of our glycerol. And two, the triglycerides form can also undergo hydrolysis to produce glycerol and fatty acid. So from this illustration over here, so we can say that glycerol and fatty acids over here will undergo condensation reaction to form a triglyceride molecule, and also this triglyceride molecule can also undergo a hydrolysis reaction to produce our glycerol and fatty acids back. So this is just a diagram or a reaction to show you how triglyceride can undergo condensation reaction and hydrolysis reaction. Fatty acid. Fatty acid are carboxylic acids consisting of a long chain hydrocarbon with methyl group at one end. So this is the methyl group at one end, and a carboxyl group. So this is the carboxyl group or the carboxylic acid group at the other end. So this is just a simple structure of fatty acids. Let's look at the types of fatty acid. There are various types of fatty acid. And fatty acids are categorized by their length. In other words, how many carbons they have. So now let's look at the short chain fatty acid, medium chain fatty acid, and the long chain fatty acid. The short chain fatty acids have 2 to 5 carbon atoms. The medium chain fatty acid have 6 to 12 carbon atoms, and the long chain fatty acid have 13 or more carbon atoms. Fatty acid chains are also categorized by the bonds connecting the carbon in the chains. A single bond is just one bond between the carbon atoms. And what you have to notice is that when a fatty acid chain has only single bonds, it's called saturated fatty acid because it has many hydrogen atoms as possible and it's saturated with them. And when a double bond is present within the carbon atoms, it's called unsaturated fatty acids. So let us now look at saturated fatty acids. So first of all, what you have to notice is that saturated fatty acids have only single bonds between the carbon atoms. So as you can see over here, the bonds between the carbon atoms are single. And also they have many hydrogens as possible, making them saturated. So as you can see, right, so all the carbon atoms in the saturated fatty acid are being surrounded by hydrogens. So this make them um, saturated. And three, triglycerides with saturated fatty acids are straight. So they are packed together really well, and as a result, they are usually solid at room temperature. And what you also have to note is that the longer the saturated fatty acid chain, the more likely it will be solid at room temperature. Unsaturated fatty acid. Unsaturated fatty acid with one or more double bonds between the carbon atoms. Unsaturated fatty acid also have fewer hydrogens as compared to the saturated fatty acid. And also they have kink or branched in molecules and therefore do not pack well, hence liquids at room temperature. Unsaturated fatty acid can further be grouped into a monounsaturated fatty acid and polyunsaturated fatty acid. So the monounsaturated fatty acids are fatty acids with only a single double bond between the carbon atoms. So as you can see from this diagram or from this molecular structure over here, we can see that this acid has just a single double bond in each structure. So this is an example of monounsaturated fatty acid, and an example of a monounsaturated fatty acid is the oleic acid. Polyunsaturated fatty acid are fatty acid with two or more double bonds between the carbon atoms. So as you can see from this structure over here, this acid has two double bonds and this acid also has three double bonds. So these two acids happens to be a polyunsaturated fatty acid because of the presence of the two or more double bonds between the carbon atoms. So in summary, we are saying that fatty acids are long hydrogen carbon chains with methyl end at one side and with a carboxylic acid or carboxyl group at the other side. And also saturated fatty acids are fatty acids with single bonds or they have no double bonds. So what you can say is that in a simple diagram, a saturated fatty acid can be illustrated as this. So as said that we are saying they have no double bonds. Monounsaturated fatty acid, example, the oleic acid or the omega-9 fatty acids have a single carbon-to-carbon double bond as shown over here. And in simple diagram or simple illustration, it can be written as this. Also, for the polyunsaturated fatty acid, we are saying they have two or more carbon-carbon double bonds in them. And this can also be written or shown as this. So this is just a summary of the fatty acid and the types of fatty acid that happens to be the saturated and the unsaturated fatty acids. So now let us look at the methyl end or the omega end of a fatty acid. So what you have to notice is that the methyl end, also known as the omega end of a fatty acid, so now let us look at the methyl end or the omega end. The methyl end of a fatty acid is called omega end. So this is just a structure or a molecular structure of a fatty acid. Now, so as you can see over here, so we are saying that fatty acids are long chain hydrocarbons with a carboxylic acid or a carboxyl group at one end and a methyl group at one end. And what you have to notice is that the methyl group is called the omega group. So from this structure over here, this happens to be the omega end of our fatty acids. The methyl end or the omega end of a fatty acid. First of all, what we have to note is that the methyl end of a fatty acid is called omega end. So this is the structure of fatty acid as shown here. And this is the carboxylic or the carboxyl group of the fatty acid, and this is the methyl end of the fatty acid. So the methyl end is also called the omega end of the fatty acid. So when we just talk of the omega end of a fatty acid, it's just the methyl end of the fatty acid. So what you have to note is that if the double bond is on the 6 carbon atom from the end, it's called omega-6 fatty acid. And if the double bond is on the 9 carbon from the end, it's called omega-9 fatty acid. And if the double bond is on the 3 carbon from the end, it's called omega-3 fatty acid. Now, so let's just look at these examples. So this is the methyl end of this fatty acid over here. So from these, we can see that the first double bond is on the 3rd carbon atom. So this is the first carbon atom, this is the 2nd carbon atom, and this is the 3rd carbon atom. So this is called omega-3 fatty acid. And if you just look at this, the double bond is on the first, is on the 3rd carbon atom, the first, second, third. So this is also called omega-3 fatty acid. Now, let us look at the omega-6 fatty acid. So if you are to count the carbon atoms from the end, this is the first carbon atom, second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. So now we can see that the double bond is on the 6th carbon atom from the end. So this type of fatty acid is called omega-6 fatty acid. Difference between fat and oil. 1. Fat is solid at room temperature, whilst oil is liquid at room temperature. 2. Fat is obtained from animals, that is from butter, egg, yolk, or meat, whilst oils are obtained from plant sources. Fats have only saturated fatty acid. Oils have saturated and unsaturated fatty acid. Compound lipids. Compound lipids are also known or can also be called as conjugated lipids. And what we have to note is that they are esters of fatty acids with alcohol and possesses additional groups which may be phosphorus, proteins, and sugar. So what you have to note is that if the additional group is phosphorus, we have phospholipids. And if the additional group is protein, we have lipoproteins. And if the additional group is sugar, we have glycolipids. So let us look at phospholipids. And first of all, what you have to note is that phospholipids are the structure units of cell membrane. And phospholipids are a class of lipids whose molecules has a hydrophilic head containing a phosphate group and 2 hydrophobic tail derived from fatty acids. Now, so if we should look at the structure over here, this is the hydrophilic head of the phospholipid, and this is the hydrophobic tail of the phospholipid. And this is the phosphate groups at the hydrophilic head of the phospholipid, and these are the two fatty acids at the hydrophobic tail. And what you can also see over here is that the fatty acid over here, we have a saturated fatty acid as over here and an unsaturated fatty acid here. So this is just the structure of phospholipids.